Hey, what's up, guys? This is our Oscar movie rundown, and we will be quickly reviewing and giving our culminated grades over several movies that have been nominated for an Oscar this year that we have not yet reviewed.
Yeah, and the movies that we have reviewed that are nominated for an Oscar this year, we'll put a link in the description for those reviews. And also, some of the movies that are only nominated for one category, we'll be discussing those in the category that they're nominated in.
Also, there are a few categories that we have not seen one single movie from, like foreign movies and a few other ones, so we will not be going over those at all. So here we are with Two Awesome Men's Oscar Movie Rundown. Just so y'all know, we do have these flashcards right here, so we will be throwing these, and just so we can quickly go through all these. So the first movie I'm going to go over is Menace, and we have the fact that this movie is has fantastic dialogue and fantastic acting. It's a little slow, but the slowness is really interesting, so that might lose a few people. And also, a character made a decision that was kind of weird, and it was, I don't really know, it's pretty much a make or break decision, and also it was kind of done a little strangely.
Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. It was a very controversial movie, but I honestly liked it a lot. It had a nice combination of heart-wrenchingness and lightheartedness. It was funny and it was depressing all at the same time, and the acting all around was phenomenal. So
yes, okay, so Call Me By Your Name. It may lose a few people, kind of like Phantom Thread, to where nothing really happens, there's not really a whole bunch of conflict, and there's not really much drama at all. So the movie I really liked that fact about it, because it really felt real and true, and the acting was extremely subtle, and this movie is actually pretty great.
The Post is one of those movies where pretty much the entire cast did phenomenal, even the minor characters. There's so many characters in the movie, and they all did fantastic at acting. The story, the writing, everything was well written, and it was just very intriguing to watch. The Shape of Water. The Shape of Water was an extremely different movie, and that movie may kind of set some people a little off, because pretty much a lot of people know why. The story was so beautiful, the visuals were fantastic. There was a nice hint of like a shade of green throughout the entire movie that really just gave this nice little dark feeling to it. It is definitely like a extremely bold love story. Sally Hawkins, if she wins this Oscar, it would be fantastic because she did phenomenal in this movie. Darkest Hour, honestly, I kept forgetting that it was Gary Oldman playing Winston Churchill because his acting was just incredible, and including the makeup and everything. He was just like a completely different person. And also, it's interesting because Dunkirk, which is also nominated for Best Picture this year, Darkest Hour was sort of like the behind the scenes. Dunkirk was in the action. Darkest Hour was sort of the behind the scenes sort of action. The only two things I can say that were negative about it were that you have to get past the fact that there's a lot of talking in this movie. It's a war movie, but there's a lot of talking in it. And also, it didn't really give you the sense of how powerful Germany was at the time of World War II, so you didn't get that feeling of urgency that it should have had.
Blade Runner 2049 was a visual masterpiece. This movie was so freaking beautiful. And I've heard a lot of complaints that this movie was pretty slow, and I'm not gonna lie, it is kind of slow, but I really didn't have a problem with it because it really worked out to its benefit. It had some great writing and a great story, and that slowness really helped to build up all this story to it. Also, Ryan Gosling does fantastic in this movie. I really think that's a given. Ryan Gosling is a fantastic actor in practically anything he does. Also, my biggest thing that I loved about this movie was Harrison Ford was in this movie, and his whenever he came onto the movie, his introduction to this movie was so subtle. They didn't want to make this big deal about this big actor being on the movie. It was just so subtle and so wonderful.
Baby Driver was such a well-crafted movie. Edgar Wright obviously put so many fine details in this movie. It's very fast-paced, very upbeat. The music, everything worked. The only thing that I can say is that Ansel Elgort's acting was just a little subpar at times. And also, a lot of the characters, they felt sort of cartoonish at times.
Molly's Game. The beginning, I'm going to say, was fantastic. The whole movie is wonderful, but the beginning was one of my favorite things about this movie. It's like a machine gun just shooting information at you constantly over and over again, and you really got to pay quick attention to that beginning because it's giving you very important information. And even though it's fast-paced, the whole movie's fast-paced, but even though that beginning is extremely fast-paced, it was very well put together and very well seen and very well understood. Also, the editing in this movie is fantastic, especially how fast-paced I was just saying a while ago. The editing to it is just phenomenal. The amazing acting from everybody, from especially Idris Elba. Idris Elba, I actually don't know how he wasn't nominated for an Oscar this year, but he did fantastic in Molly's Game. And it was just such a well-crafted story.
Mudbound was such a heart-wrenching movie that it actually became hard to watch at times because they didn't sugarcoat anything about racism in the 1940s. The friendship grown between the white son and the black son just was such a charming thing to see, and so refreshing because of everything else was so depressing. But I will say that the beginning of this movie was too long because the main part of the movie was the friendship that was created between those two characters, but they didn't even meet. They didn't really even come into the movie until halfway through the movie.
I, Tonya was a true story about Tonya Harding, and this movie was also very fast-paced. It reminded me a lot of Wolf of Wall Street, especially because there was a lot of fourth wall breaks. And the fourth wall breaks in this movie, there was very few of them, and they really were well implemented into this movie. The acting and the writing was so great. The acting all around was pretty phenomenal. Even Sebastian Stan, he does great in like the Marvel movies as the Winter Soldier, but in this movie I really saw his true acting, and I've never really seen that before in him.
Ferdinand was definitely a movie that was tailored towards kids. There was a lot of jokes that could have been good, but they took a step too far just to appeal to kids. But if you just take the meat of the movie and you take away all those cheesy jokes that were just aimed for kids, it's actually a decent story, and the animation was great.
The Big Sick was very hilarious, but I had a nice little subtle hilariousness to it. The jokes weren't outright, they weren't too big, it wasn't trying to be too much more than it was, but it was just very funny. Also, the movie was so emotional. There was times that I was just watching and I could almost feel something just falling out of my eye. I don't know what it was, but I felt some liquid falling. Also, the build-up of the relationships between the main character and then his girlfriend's parents is just so wonderful in this movie, and it just had such a wonderful message.
The Breadwinner was such an impactful movie, and it's also another reason why I love the Oscars, because a lot of movies that might not be in the spotlight actually gets some recognition, because I would have never heard of The Breadwinner, but it was such a flooring movie, and just it floored me because this was another movie that didn't pull any punches with its grittiness and just showing realness of how these women's lives are, and it's just such an amazing anime movie.
The Boss Baby. Okay. I don't really know why this movie was nominated for an Oscar. If you watch this movie and you look at it and you're like, and you don't really know that it's nominated for an Oscar, it's actually can be pretty enjoyable and pretty fun. But you kind of feel like that the writing table, they just started throwing out all these ideas and they decided to not get rid of one of them. So it was just kind of a whole bunch of random stuff happening in the movie. But it was a really fun movie. But it just was not anywhere near Oscar worthy. I really don't understand why it was nominated.
Coco is honestly one of the most beautifully animated movies I've ever seen, especially when the main character finally gets to the land of the dead. And also is actually decently funny. A lot of the jokes that they made were actually decently funny. They weren't just aimed for kids like Ferdinand was. And also it was very emotional. I almost cried, and I know a lot of other people in the theater that I was at actually cried because I heard a lot of sniffles. And but the only thing that I know Marquez didn't like was that the narration at the beginning. They could have found a different way to tell the story at the beginning.
Loving Vincent was a very well illustrated movie. The animation was fantastic. It was painted, and it was painted in a way of Vincent van Gogh's art. The art, it was just so phenomenal and so beautiful to see on the screen. There wasn't that much though that they could do with this movie, unfortunately, because the storyline kind of just follows a straight path. and so there's not really a lot they could have done. So this movie does suffer from being extremely slow, unfortunately. It's very slow and it's very quiet, and so it may throw a few people off. It even kind of made me not really fully like it as much as I could have. But I will promise you, if you are a huge fan of Vincent van Gogh art, you will love this movie because it does have an interesting storyline to it.
Christopher Plummer for All the Money in the World. Honestly, I truly think that he was only nominated because of the Kevin Spacey debacle. I mean, his acting was good. It wasn't bad at all, but I don't think it was anything special.
Willem Dafoe in The Florida Project. Man, he was one of my favorite actors this year. His acting was just so subtle. You know, there wasn't nothing big about it. This movie in general, I'm not going to talk about it too much, but this movie in general, there wasn't anything big about it. It was just a very subtle movie. Willem Dafoe's acting is what I'm talking about right now, and that was just, it was just out of this world. It was amazing. He had no monologues, he had no really emotional scenes, but he really brought like a realistic and a true life to this character.
Denzel Washington and Roman J. Israel Esquire. Come on, it's Denzel.
Denzel Washington, the best actor ever. He's so darn cool. He's so darn clever.
Wonder. Okay, so this movie was nominated for makeup and hairstyling. Here's a picture of a little boy that was there. There you go. That's all I gotta say for that.
Victoria Abdul for costume design, makeup, and hairstyling. It was good, so.
So guys, there was our very first Oscar movie rundown. Let us know what you thought about it. It was our first time, so we're trying to figure out if it's any good. Also, just so y'all know, we bought tickets to go see every short film that was nominated for this year's Oscar. Also, tomorrow we will be filming our second annual Oscar Awards, and we will try to make sure that is up before the Oscars on Sunday. So go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, and also comment and let us know what your picks are for this year's Oscars.
And don't forget to follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at 2 Awesome Men.
And as always, thank you so much for watching, and you will see us later.